Everyone was dying to know who would be named Lady of the Year. Lady Liza Caperol announced that no lady would be stepping out with a member of the imperial family this year. The girls were all thinking, isn't Duke Luciel part of the imperial family? Little did they know, he never attends events like these. Luciel couldn't control his powers and had a really bad temper, which made him the one embarrassment to his family's reputation. So after the poor prince was given the title of Duke, he was immediately kicked to the curb. Nobody expected Duke Luciel Winterrose Greswell to show up at today's event. The redhead noblewoman was stunned when she saw him. But the prince didn't come alone. He was with his companion, Lady Daphne Peregrine, a girl with snow-white skin, emerald eyes, and gorgeous, thick pink hair. She gave everyone a polite, kinda distant greeting. Truth is, Daphne Peregrine's your run-of-the-mill villainess straight out of the romance novel the main character read. When the goddess went to war to kick the devil's butt, 4 heroes followed her. One of them was the villainess's ancestor. Everybody knows that members of that family have had crazy magic powers or been total swordmasters for generations. Except Daphne didn't have any of that. To top it off, her mom, Amilla Peregrine, died giving birth to her. The Duke, heartbroken by the loss of his daughter, turned his back on his own granddaughter, and that's when Daphne thought she could finally catch a break from all the BS. This chick was famous for stirring up trouble for everyone, no matter their status. In the original story, this girl caused a bunch of messed up stuff, which led to him getting exiled from the capital, far away. But things are different now. Luciel leaned in close to the beautiful woman and whispered that all eyes in the room were on her. Daphne knew it, because that's exactly why she came. The Duke remarked with a smile that she was used to the attention way more than he was. Even though the heroine wanted this, she still couldn't shake this feeling of unease. Daphne decided to remind His Highness that he wasn't allowed to get jealous. Luciel froze at those words. He didn't want anyone else looking at her, even if they were in a ballroom packed with guests. The Duke couldn't stand it, and he really didn't like all those guys staring at Daphne. But she reminded Luciel that he was her partner. If it weren't for His Highness, the heroine wouldn't even be here at this shindig, turning heads and announcing her comeback. So Daphne gave her partner a genuine thank you. Luciel went beet red from that gorgeous smile of hers. He was stoked to be standing right next to her. The Duke acting like this always threw the main character for a loop, but she was still happy if he was happy. The noble lady managed to get back to the capital with the Wizard Tower Duke, who wasn't even supposed to be her partner in the original story. Right now, Daphne feels like she dodged a bullet, like she avoided ending up 6 feet under in some dungeon. Whether the novel's main character shows up or not, this girl's gonna soak up everything she wants and then, well, kick the bucket. The musicians struck up a beautiful tune. Everyone started dancing, and Luciel decided to ask the lady how she was liking her first ever imperial ball. Daphne said her expectations were spot on because everything here was just mind-blowing, epic, and beautiful. The Duke stepped closer to her and hoped that in her eyes he was the most magnificent thing around. The prince was acting weird again, so Daphne reminded His Highness that they were being watched. Luciel, though, couldn't care less what other people think. The girl smiled warmly, thinking about how unique this guy was. Of course, she's a big deal in this world too, but the truth is, things weren't always like this. Back in her past life, Daphne was just a regular girl from South Korea. What's worse, she was raised by a super strict grandma who was always chewing her out for every little mistake. Neither her dad nor her stepmom gave a damn about her life. So the main character decided that as soon as she got a job, she'd cut all ties with that whole family. All that hard work paid off. She got into a decent college and aced it. She nailed her internship at a big company, so if she wins this internal contest, they'll hire her full-time. But handing her contest materials to the manager? Big mistake. Turns out nobody cared about the truth, and the intern got canned. Our girl was hammered, so she didn't react fast enough when those headlights blinded her. Then, the next thing she knew, she felt this sharp pain all over. She thought it was game over, until she woke up in a totally different world. The room had a huge mirror, fancy furniture, and definitely didn't look like a hospital room. She knew she was alive for sure, but in some weird, unfamiliar place. A red-haired maid walked in and asked the lady if she was awake. Suddenly, the main character felt a sharp pain in her chest and started coughing violently, even though her throat was killing her. The maid rushed to the bed, all freaked out, saying the poison hadn't completely left her system yet. In a small mirror next to her bed, the protagonist saw she had pink hair. She needed to get a good look at herself ASAP, so she ran to a huge mirror and froze for a second. The maid asked Lady Daphne, looking totally lost, if she was all right. Memories slammed into the main character's head all at once. Society called Daphne Peregrine an evil witch from birth, saying she was super aggressive and obsessed with her fiancé. They wanted her gone permanently. Daphne tried to tell people she hadn't done anything wrong and that the girl seduced Roderick, but it was no use. Now the girl understood. She'd become the main character in the novel she'd just finished reading. No way I could believe it. She turned out to be a villainess who tried to poison the saint out of jealousy and ended up completely alone. Even though my past life sucked, this one's not going to be a walk in the park either. Suddenly a man walked into the room. He said coldly that her suicide attempt was a waste of money and an embarrassment to the whole family. If the heroine remembered correctly, this guy was her uncle on her mother's side, Marquis Lias Peregrine. He's a public prosecutor and also considered a top scholar and big shot at the academy. Plus, he despises Daphne because she caused his sister's death. The Daphne our heroine is now stuck being? Marquis Lias said, trying to off yourself just because Prince Roderick dissed you is pathetic. Daphne's fiancé cheated on her, so she decided to off herself with poison. Even the main character, reading the book, couldn't believe how dumb Daphne was. Right now, she had no clue how she even ended up in this body. Marquis Lias said sternly that this was his last act of kindness. He tossed his niece a small vial of liquid and added that her punishment would be decided later. From now on, the man wasn't going to put up with her pathetic behavior and wasn't giving her any more chances. Daphne won't even step foot outside the mansion until the Duke returns, and with that, Marquis Lias left the room. Daphne studied herbalism to become a saint, so she built her own greenhouse and started growing medicinal herbs. But the state of this place was just awful. The medicine Marquis Lias gave her pretty much neutralized the poison, but definitely not completely. If that were the real Daphne, she probably wouldn't have the skills to whip up any medicine. But our girl here had 5 years of slinging herbs at an Eastern medicine clinic under her belt. Because of that, she can now identify medicinal herbs blindfolded. Daphne was determined to find herbs similar to the plants from her past life so she could make some medicine for herself. But suddenly she heard a kid's voice. So she decided to peek out into the hallway. The boy, grinning ear to ear, asked his brother how he was ever going to become a knight if he was so slow. He didn't see Daphne and totally ran into her. The main character, annoyed, asked the kids who gave them permission to run around in the hallways. The twin helped his brother get up. Daphne realized, standing right in front of her, were Hermano Peregrine and Julius Peregrine. These are the sons of Marquis Lias and also the main character's cousins. Lias' wife died shortly after giving birth to the twins, and the kids never really felt their father's love. After that, they met the novel's main character, who gave them love for the first time, which is all they ever wanted. Out of nowhere, the boys called Daphne a real piece of work. These little brats are so bad, they're practically demons. The way the twins were talking to their older sister ticked her off, and the boys immediately tensed up. They'd look a lot tougher if they didn't stutter. It's kinda cute watching them try to hide how scared they are. The way they act reminds Daphne of her brothers from her past life. The main character raised her hand. Hermano and Julia squeezed their eyes shut, bracing for a punch in the face. But Daphne just patted them on the head, which the twins totally weren't expecting. They were so cute, the main character couldn't help herself, so she suggested they go get into some trouble. Julius went bright red, called her a bad name, and asked indignantly why she was touching him. He grabbed Hermano's hand and said they were leaving. These stubborn little guys really reminded the main character of puppies, but it was way cuter in person. Then Daphne noticed the maids, who were frantically searching for Master Hermano and Master Julius. So she pointed the girls in the direction the boys went. They thanked her, trembling with fear, and took off like a shot. Daphne wondered if people running around in the hallways was normal here, 'cause that's not what she pictured. Then she tried to whip up something that resembled medicine. Daphne was freaked out, but she knew she had to down the whole thing. Steeling herself, the girl chugged the entire potion. But the medicine actually tasted pretty good, and what's more, her sore throat felt way better. But then a strange voice made her jump. A woman walked into the greenhouse and asked the little girl if she was all right. She hugged the main character from behind and said she'd been super worried about her. Confused, Daphne asked the woman who she was. Turns out the stranger was named Flora Charlottale, and she was actually her beloved mentor. Back when the former Empress Yahello was young, Daphne's grandpa, the current Duke Peregrine, turned down her marriage proposal. But Yahello couldn't handle the loss, so that villain Daphne helped her infiltrate the Duke's family. Then, at a banquet, poison was found, and the former empress told all the guests that Lady Daphne studied herbalism. Everyone started suspecting her, and to keep it from happening again, Hela appointed a confidant to act as an observer. So, the former empress's agent, Flora Charlotte, was sent to the Duke's house. Now, Daphne couldn't understand how someone could treat people who loved her so badly, especially her own granddaughter. Flora figured the lady was probably just really shaken up that Roderick called off the engagement. But she was ready to help, if the girl followed her advice, and then she could definitely win her fiancé back. Daphne started getting creeped out by how closely Flora was staring at her. Out of nowhere, the woman said she was so glad that her face was doing all right. Lady Peregrine's reputation is long gone, but luckily she's got a beauty that nobody can touch. If this is Daphne's only weapon, we better sharpen it up real good. Flora even said this pretty face is key to bagging Sir Roderick. This woman didn't even bother asking the main character how she was doing. Basically, she was trying to comfort the girl while treating her like a prize to be won. But Daphne wasn't gonna put up with that crap anymore, 'cause she was officially done with it. She shoved the woman's hand away, called her old-timer, and told her to start taking care of herself. Flora just said that guys are visual, so women need to put in the effort. So she should probably start taking care of herself too. Daphne put on an innocent face and told the woman her memories were a little scrambled, and she just reminded her of her grandma. Flora's clearly younger than a grandma, and probably insecure about being single, so that definitely hit a nerve. If this lady gets bent out of shape at her right now, it's gonna be hilarious. Trying to keep the anger out of her voice, Flora thanked the dear lady for her concern. Despite the smile, the main character can tell the woman is fuming. Smirking, Daphne told Flora that her favorite store was having a special discount if you came with a family member, so she suggested they go together. In other words, Daphne thought Flora was her grandma and was inviting her on a shopping trip. The woman immediately turned away and snapped that she wasn't interested. Flora promised to handle everything so the lady could relax, because health is the most important thing. And she needed to visit the Imperial Palace and the temple to report the lady's awakening. With a smile, Daphne thanked the kind old lady. Flora left the room, deciding to keep an eye on that kid, who used to be so obedient, but now he's changed. The main character stuck her tongue out at her. Suddenly it hit her. Her throat wasn't hurting anymore. Guess that medicine actually worked. Since her life had been spared, the girl had to figure out what she was supposed to do now. If she lived quietly somewhere on the outskirts, the Peregrine family would gradually forget about her. Daphne could totally live a chill life in a quiet spot in the mountains by the river, where the air's clean, and no one would ever think to look for her there. That was a seriously awesome idea. So, the main character decided to live this life as a villain with a silver spoon. Just then, sitting in the tower, Luciel took a drag and quietly said he was feeling kinda bored. The steady click of heels echoed down the hallway. You could hear little hurried footsteps right behind them. The main character turned around and asked the twins, totally deadpan, what they wanted from her. Hermano and Euless stopped dead, looking all freaked out at the lady. Then they stammered out that they weren't following her, they were just, like, walking by in the hallway. They immediately took off running towards the library, which was exactly where the main character was headed, making her think they were kinda cute. Inside, the place looked like a movie set, or one of those fancy European libraries. Daphne never would have guessed that in a library without internet, all the books would be in alphabetical order. She'd always wanted to read a book by the fireplace. The girl decided to get started, but then she felt someone staring at her. The main character looked at the twins and asked, all sarcastic, if they wanted to read together too. Julius was all like, no way, we always chill by the fireplace too. The boys were tripping out when Lady Daphne invited them to sit next to her. The main girl pointed to an open spot and said, there's totally enough room for both of you here. Since the lady wanted to hang, Julius decided to be a gentleman and offered her the seat. But usually they didn't read around other people, and Daphne sarcastically promised to write it down in her diary before bed. The herbs from her past life and this one are definitely giving off the same vibes. The kids got quiet and the girl even wondered if they'd dozed off. Daphne thought it was all talk, but it looks like the twins really are into hitting the books. The main character was floored as soon as she saw Julius holding a book on some seriously complicated magic theory. This kid's probably got Laius's brains, so the girl's kind of freaked out thinking about what he'll be like when he grows up. Meanwhile, Hermano was lost in a book of myths. The main character leaned in a little closer, but the boy snapped the book shut, startled, and clutched it tight to his chest. Daphne apologized, explaining she just thought the book looked interesting, and Julius chimed in that it was his brother's favorite. The main character asked Hermano who he liked, and the boy shyly answered, "The hero. He's strong, and together with the heroine, they beat the devil and brought peace to the empire." Not long ago, the twins saw the witch defeat the devil Flora, so they compared her to the hero. Hermano's eyes lit up with excitement, but now the boy said that he used to believe it, but now he realizes it's just a myth. But his eyes widened as soon as the girl said this. If he wants to be a hero, that means he's already got what it takes. But Julius just had to ask, how can you even be a hero without a goddess? The hero helps the goddess take down the devil, but there's no goddess or devil around here, so Hermano couldn't be a hero, right? The kid just mumbled, all embarrassed, that he was just playing pretend. Daphne started ruffling Julius's hair, saying if he keeps acting up, trouble is definitely gonna find him. She added that when trouble shows its face, someone will step up to deal with it, and then our hero can prove himself. Then she told the twins she'd finished the book she wanted to check out and was heading back to her room. The boys wanted to tag along, but she told them not to worry and to keep reading. But the guys said they were already done. Even though they ain't her real brothers, they're way more innocent and sweeter than she thought. Hermano asked his sister if she was going back to the library, and she said probably not. The kid was horrified and asked if she was really never coming back. The main character replied thoughtfully that if it wasn't too often, she might consider it. But she had conditions in return. Julius would have to call her Big Sis, the boy yelled, totally outraged, asking why he would ever have to call her that. The girl said in a sad voice that she didn't even know what to do, even though she was actually having a blast. She asked Hermano if he could do it, but if she kept laughing at them, the boys would hate her again, so she decided to just tease them a little more. Suddenly, Hermano walked up to the girl and timidly called her Sis. That was sweet, so Daphne patted the boy on the head and asked when she could visit again. Suddenly, it hit her that the twins were supposed to be in class right now. Hermano confessed he didn't want to go because those lessons were a total drag. Besides, the twins thought they already knew everything, so there was nothing left to learn. The vibe in the room just shifted. A maid walked in and called out to Master Julius and Master Hermano. The twins' lessons had started ages ago, so the maid asked the lady for permission to take the boys. The twins started to dig in their heels, but the maid explained that they'd definitely get a serious scolding and punishment if they didn't go. Unexpectedly, she asked in a suspicious tone if the lady had some business with the young masters. Daphne chuckled, because the maid was now openly implying that she was the one keeping the kids here. Suddenly, Julius yelled out that they'd been caught hanging around with a witch. The maid explained to the young master that he couldn't call Lady Peregrine a witch, but the kid just told Hermano that next time he should just take care of the witch and get to class if he didn't mind. Julius asked for a quick glance at the lady, and the girl wondered if he was asking for help. She smiled, thinking how strangely the twins were acting. At that very moment, in the Wayne district, the man slammed his fist on the table and demanded to know how they dared to suggest prices like that. The salesman politely explained that selling the product at that price wouldn't be fair. The buyer yelled that he was being way too cocky with him and suggested he might want to reconsider his business practices. The salesman's friendly face hardened, and he coldly asked the client to repeat himself. The customer started shaking with fear and stammered, asking for his total. As soon as the guy headed for the door, the shopkeeper told him to have a good one. Gale said, totally drained, that he needed to quit this gig ASAP. But then, his boss suddenly walked into the tavern and greeted him with a sly grin. The cloaked dude noticed Gale looked pissed, so the shopkeeper ranted about some clueless customer. He asked his boss what brought him in. Isles, the shop owner, also Grand Duke Lucial of the Magic Tower, pulled back his hood and asked if he was serious about quitting. Gale instantly knew his boss had heard everything. He quickly changed the subject and handed the Duke an order form for a love potion. A good-natured smile spread across Luciel's face, and he agreed to take on the job. Human emotions are so messed up, sometimes they mistake fear and stress for love. That's why we can just hang these two upside down. They'll fall for each other way faster than with a potion, and then this whole thing will be over in a snap. Since Gale was thinking of quitting, the Duke decided to stick around and keep an eye on his subordinate. As soon as Luciel got to his office, he immediately grabbed the sales ledger. According to the records, Laius Peregrine did buy the medicine for his niece, which means the lady comes from a good family. Even though she's a mess, at least she got lucky with her family. Suddenly, the guy's head started pounding, and even though he hated painkiller shots, he couldn't do anything about it. Right then, Gale burst into his boss's office without knocking. He said that Daphne Peregrine was asking for a meeting to close a deal, but Luciel just calmly told him to turn her down. But the girl also asked me to tell you that you shouldn't buy the sacred relic on the black market, 'cause it's a fake. Luciel, with a sly grin, asked the lady how she knew about the sacred relic and that it was a phony. He was also now curious why she was looking for him. The guy offered her some tea, specially brewed for such a charming lady. His hand froze when Daphne confidently asked him to take the first sip, 'cause a guest shouldn't drink until the host starts. Luciel realized this girl had done her homework on their shop. Daphne figured he might have slipped some truth serum into the tea. Right now, she was sweating because the dude across from her is the final boss that stands in the Crown Prince's way. Daphne told herself that compared to a high-pressure job interview in this capitalist hellscape, this is nothing. Suddenly, the guy announced that there's nothing in the tea. Then, he grabbed the cup and took a huge gulp. He asked the beautiful lady if she believed him now. First thing she did, the main character held out a vial, saying she wanted to verify this stuff was made here. From Daphne's memories, the heroine didn't recall actually making the poison, so someone must have given her the vial. Luciel examined it closely and replied, looking guilty, that it wasn't made in their shop. Even though they can handle pretty much any job, they're super careful about taking on contracts that involve, well, you know. Daphne's face fell until the guy mentioned he'd seen a bottle like that before. They're usually used in assassin guilds. A hit like that costs a fortune. Even nobles can't usually afford it, so this is a high-ranking aristocrat we're talking about. Daphne said she needed to find out who ordered this medicine. Luciel wasn't going to get involved, but then the heroine reminded him she'd already saved him a ton of wasted time. Time is money, and deals gotta be on the up and up. If Daphne walked into that guild herself, they'd straight up ice her, but she desperately needed Dark Shadow's help. In the original story, the crime boss and Dark Shadow were pretty tight, so Luciel was playing along for now. A smile cracked across the guy's face, and he agreed to the heroine's offer. Daphne couldn't believe she'd actually pulled it off. Luciel didn't know if the relic was legit yet, but he planned to find out real soon. Daphne had another reason for her visit, so she pulled out another vial and said it was an antidote she'd cooked up. The guy looked totally confused and asked if their antidote hadn't worked. Daphne gave him a suspicious look and asked how he knew she'd taken another antidote. So Luciel said that Marquis Peregrine ordered the stuff from them, and it's a proven formula. She figured her uncle's rep probably got a boost, since he went to the dark side just for his niece. Luciel asked if there were any complications, but she shot that down, saying her medicine was better. The antidote tasted like garbage and smelled even worse. But her medicine tasted way better and smelled better too, and she felt better right away after drinking it. Now it was the lady's turn, and she had to answer correctly. How did she know the holy relic was fake? Daphne said that saints can find sacred relics, and she went through hell to become a saint. But the girl doesn't even have proof that it's a fake. The main character confessed she broke probation and disobeyed her uncle by running away from home. If the truth comes out, she'll have to spend her life in a tiny house on the edge of town or get married off by her uncle. So you gotta wonder, did she just come here to gamble? Luciel listened carefully to the lady and gave her a week, said he'd get in touch as soon as he was done with everything. The heroine's face stayed blank, but inside she was celebrating her victory. Suddenly, the guy in the cloak stood up and offered his hand to the beautiful lady. Daphne wondered if these kinds of manners were normal for the Dark Shadow, but she reached out and took his hand anyway. Luciel suddenly flinched. The heroine looked at him, surprised, as the guy froze and stared at her intently. Then he told the lady to be extra careful, because the stairs going down were pretty steep. Her high heels made it awkward, but Daphne liked his consideration. As soon as Lady Peregrine left the shop, Gale looked at his thoughtful master, confused. The boss walked the lady to the door, which wasn't like him at all, so the merchant started thinking it was love. He lightly touched the boss and yanked his hand back real quick, but it was enough for Luciel to hear his thoughts. So Gale decided to ask what kind of cut they'd be getting from this job. The Duke told him to shut his trap, or he'd get another taste of magic. It's wild. The guy who lost his love didn't try to off himself, but someone else wanted to do the job for him. Rumor has it Lady Peregrine is bad news. It's pretty clear she's trying to pin the blame on them for brewing up that poison. After that botched suicide attempt, the girl probably realized she screwed up big time. Luciel showed his guy the antidote Lady Peregrine cooked up herself, and now Gale got why the boss walked her out. The master can absorb another person's magical power through physical contact. And reading people's minds, too. Either way, this girl is seriously shady on so many levels, so Gale asked her what she was up to. But for some reason, Luciel didn't pick up anything. Anyone would be shaking in their boots from the Duke's harsh glare right now? The brunette exclaimed that it was just impossible because she couldn't live without magic. Contrary to the rumors, there wasn't a hint of romance since Lady Peregrine's gaze was totally calm. Standing before Luciel, she offered her terms for a deal and even had the nerve to mock his medicine. But inside there was a really weird feeling. He asked Gale if it was true that this medicine was more effective than theirs. The brunette went blank and guessed, confused, that it was probably poisoned. Even so, Luciel decided to see for himself what this girl was up to and chugged the whole thing down. He didn't care if it was actually poison, because a mana surge would save him, and he'd just run an experiment on his own body. But the man's eyes immediately widened. Gale hurriedly offered a painkiller in case another mana surge happened, but Luciel replied that he was fine. The magic inside him was growing out of control. Only using spiritual power could suppress the magic, since they were opposites. But that wasn't helping either. That's why, after Luciel was left alone in the magic tower, he made a bunch of, well, he wasn't in a good state of mind. But right now, his headache was gone. He remembered the girl's face, the one whose thoughts and feelings he couldn't read. Luciel was certain she was the one who could cure the ailment that had plagued him for so damn long. The guy just couldn't figure out who this girl was. As soon as the main character stepped out of the carriage, she felt a wave of nausea rising in her throat. Guess you can get motion sickness in this world too. The maid handed the lady her parasol, and Daphne figured she'd been pretty stressed out while she was gone. The heroine realized the Duke hadn't been looking for her, so not caring about each other was apparently normal in this mansion. Daphne pulled out a pouch of coins and asked the maid and butler to take them. They immediately refused, saying they were just doing their jobs. The heroine totally understood them, but sometimes you gotta pay for help, so she insisted they take the thank you gift. The maid and butler thanked her for her incredible generosity. Daphne also told the girl to take an umbrella. She was worried the maid would get soaked. The girl with the red pigtails blushed and thanked Lady Peregrine for her thoughtfulness and care. The maid let her know that dinner had just been prepared. The main character pulled out her watch, shocked that it was already dinner time. She asked if the children had eaten, and the maid said probably not, since the light in the study was still on. That was because the young masters were studying hard. Daphne asked indignantly if they couldn't take a break during their studies, so they'd eat later. The maid replied timidly that their teacher, Count Mentes, had said so. This guy's not just a descendant of Peregrine of Beltane, he's a real piece of work, right up there with Flora in this mansion. Daphne couldn't care less if the kids eat or starve, honestly. All she wanted to know was where the study is. Count Mendez scoffed, calling the young masters pathetic. Their basic sword skills are garbage, and their theory and general knowledge are just plain awful. Julius was pissed, asking how they're supposed to write a plan and thesis for advanced magic. The guy said the Marquis could do anything at their age, but somehow they can't do squat. Anyway, he figured the two young masters were more like the late Lady Eileen. That's the kind of look Lias has. Back in the day, Mendez was a gifted kid, even killing it at fencing and academics. He always figured he'd get accepted into Peregrine, even if he wasn't a direct descendant of that legendary family. But every single time, Lias Peregrine just kept winning. In the end, Mentes never managed to beat Lias, not even once. If that guy didn't exist, he'd be the perfect fit for Peregrine, hands down. Mentes couldn't go back and get even with Lias for crushing his pride, but he could sure as hell have some fun taking it out on these two kids who looked just like him. The guy was grateful to Flora for the opportunity and said with a sneer that Eileen was probably cursing them from up there, and definitely wondering how she could have birthed such disappointing specimens. Julius wanted to protest, but his brother grabbed his arm. With tears in his eyes, Hermano said he couldn't take seeing their father disappointed in them anymore. Count Mentes suggested we wrap up the session, promising to crank up the intensity even more tomorrow. But suddenly the door burst open and Daphne appeared, saying she couldn't stand listening to such absolute garbage. The teacher, all skeptical, asked if the lady was implying his words were garbage. The main character, with a sly grin, strolled into the room, saying he probably just bumped his head. Mentes knew she didn't get along with the kids, so he didn't get why she'd bother caring about them. The thought that she might have overheard his comments about Eileen made the guy tense up. If the lady complained to Laius, he'd switch his focus to him, and Daphne would be relatively off the hook. However, if that happened, Mentes would definitely be toast. The Count couldn't let that happen, so he tried to calmly ask what this kind of behavior was during a lesson. Daphne wondered if it was appropriate to talk like that about the deceased mother of kids who were 20 years younger. No doubt about it now, the lady heard everything, which means she could start making trouble. But Mentes has a pretty solid excuse lined up. Daphne's not just an embarrassment, she's a curse on the Peregrine family, so Laius won't believe a word she says. The only witnesses are the twins, but they feel terrible for their dad, so they won't rat her out. That's why Mentes has to go all the way now to win this thing. Meanwhile, the main character told him to quit acting like he doesn't know what's up. The Earl replied with a sly grin that he wasn't acting, he was just seeing some really bad behavior from the lady. Daphne reached for her teacup and told the guy that couldn't be right. Earl Mentes announced he had no other choice, so he'd be forced to report this incident to the Duke. His eyes went wide, and his sly grin vanished the second the main character dumped the whole cup of tea on his head. He immediately started yelling about how dare she, but Daphne calmly replied that he was talking nonsense, and she had no idea what he meant. The Earl saw that peregrine look in the lady's eyes. The man promised to complain to the Duke, but the girl just dropped her cup. The sound of the shattering china made Mentes freeze in confusion, as Daphne asked him to tell her uncle everything in detail, and especially to add that she tried to, well, let's just say she wasn't happy with his words. Then they'll both see who enjoys that more. Earl Mentes flinched, because Lady Daphne's gaze was now exactly like Duke Peregrine's. This was getting dangerous, so the man headed for the exit and promised he wouldn't let this slide. Daphne didn't really want to go this far, but talking like that about a dead mother to her children was way out of line. She immediately checked if the twins were okay and told them to watch out for the broken glass on the floor. Hermano asked her why she helped them, since they were the only ones to blame. Their mom died because of them, and that's why their dad can't look them in the eye, which means everything the teacher said is true. If they hadn't been born, Mom would still be alive, and Dad would be happy. Everything the teacher said is true, so the boy's voice cracked as he asked again, why did she help them? Daphne calmly replied that she didn't think what the teacher said was true. There's nobody in this world who shouldn't have been born. What's more, when the hero's around, he'll save anyone who's in trouble. The main character started wiping Hermano's tears and told him to stop crying. Daphne also told Julius to stop, but the boy exclaimed that he wasn't crying at all. Hermano laughed, saying it was hilarious how his little bro was trying to hide his tears. But looking at each other, they just couldn't hold it in anymore. So they hugged tight and burst into tears. Seeing the twins and how much they supported each other, a warm smile spread across the main character's face. A few minutes later, though, Daphne was wondering why she was stuck between them. She asked them to let go of her dress, but Julius asked all pathetic if his sis didn't want to hang with them. The main character said she was just uncomfortable, and Hermano's face started to crumple like he was gonna cry again. Good thing these kids are so darn cute. Daphne remembered they hadn't even had dinner yet, so she suggested they all go to the dining hall together. The girl wanted to tease Julius a little, so she asked if he wanted to eat with his big sis. But the boy's next answer totally threw her for a loop. Julius, all shy, said he wanted to eat with his sis. The heroine felt this weird thing inside, like she'd tamed a stray alley cat. She grabbed the kids by the hand and headed to the dining hall. As soon as they hit the hallway, the twins spotted the umbrella, proof Daphne had been through it recently. Hermano wanted to share the umbrella with his sister, but Julius piped up, 'cause he wanted to walk with Daphne himself. The heroine laid down the law. If they kept bickering, they were going solo. Julius, spooked by his sister's tone, told his brother he could have the umbrella with Daphne. But the kid decided he'd rather walk in the rain. The girl ruffled the twins' hair and said they'd all share the umbrella together. Miss Flora was fuming, asking what took so damn long. The maid apologized to the woman and held an umbrella over her. Flora heard even the former empress was done with her crap. Daphne wasn't doing everything she was told. Instead of quietly kicking the bucket from the poison, she's acting all unpredictable now. Right now, that little brat is just like her mother, Amilla Peregrine, who everyone said was a dummy 'cause she couldn't do magic either. Flora decided to off Daphne before Marquis Peregrine gets back to the estate. She sighed dreamily because she was sure that someday Laius Peregrine would totally be her man. The woman asked the maid if the twins were behaving themselves while she was gone. The girl hesitantly said that they showed up super late to class today too. Flora was absolutely livid. She'd specifically asked Count Mentes to tutor the kids. She demanded to know what the hell was going on. The maid just said she didn't know, but the boys were seeing a lot of the lady. Flora was convinced that Witch Daphne was deliberately meddling with the kids' education. So she asked the maid, real sharp, where the lady was right now. The girl said Miss Daphne was in the dining room with the two young ladies. Ever since Amila died, the family never ate together in the dining room. But now Daphne's having dinner there with the twins? Flora just couldn't figure out what Daphne was up to. She decided to go check on the lady herself. But suddenly she saw Count Mentes standing right in front of her. Flora asked him, surprised, what he was doing here, walking in the rain when their lesson wasn't even finished. "Are you even aware of what went down in the last class?" Mentes demanded, clearly pissed. Lady Peregrine threw tea in his face and on top of that had the nerve to threaten him. He'd been holding back for Miss Flora and the former Empress's sake, but he wasn't going to take it anymore. Flora's mind flashed to the former Empress, who'd hoped she wouldn't be let down again. The woman clenched her fist, not understanding how that brazen Daphne dared to interfere with her again. She spun around sharply as soon as the butler confessed he had something to tell her. Actually, Lady Peregrine went to the Wayne district today, but nobody knew about it, so the butler was worried. Flora frowned, wondering if that little brat suspected something. Maybe the lady will just say she went there to buy accessories. But nobody's gonna buy that, and everyone's gonna think she might have hooked up with the Assassin's Guild. So yeah, it was the perfect time for Flora to take her down. Just then, Daphne told the guys to slow down, even if the food was good, 'cause they could choke. But she knew they were starving. Daphne realized she was actually really enjoying eating with them. If she takes off, she won't get to eat like this again. It even made her a little sad. But she snapped out of it quick, because she still had to get the heck out of here ASAP. Hermano figured that just being together made the dinner way better. The main character was surprised to realize the boys liked eating with company that much. Looks like their dad, Lias, never ate with them. But he cared about the twins, so maybe the Marquis just didn't know how to show his feelings or something like that. If Lias Peregrine doesn't express himself, the kids will never know how he feels. This bummed the main character out big time, so she chugged a glass of water in one go. The Marquis's heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. Earlier, Miss Flora told him about the incident with Count Mentes, so now the guy's even thinking about quitting. And also, the lady secretly left the estate today and visited the Wayne district, where there are a lot of shady shops. That's why Flora was worried about her behavior. The woman heard that the lady's gotten pretty close to the twins lately. Now that Count Mentes is out of the picture, the boys might fall under the lady's influence. The dining room door swung open, and the Marquis appeared in the doorway. He asked Daphne, his voice like ice, what she was up to. The main character looked at her uncle, surprised, wondering why he'd suddenly shown up. The Marquis snatched the glass from Julius's hand, asking anxiously if he was feeling okay. Daphne was floored by the thought that her uncle actually thought she was trying to, mess with his kids. The Marquis ordered the butler to get them out of there pronto. Lias had heard about Count Mentes, so he came right out and asked his niece if it was all true. The main character calmly confirmed it, and the Marquis, totally ticked off, demanded to know what kind of stunt this was. He told her to spit it out right now and stop playing coy. Daphne downed the whole glass in one go, making her uncle reach for her in alarm, trying to stop her. The girl asked, all innocence, if her uncle was surprised she drank some water. Or maybe he just thought there was poison in the glass. If we don't clear up this misunderstanding, the main character's gonna be living under suspicion for the rest of her life. So Daphne explained that she was drinking that water first, but Julius choked, so she let him have some to wash it down. If the water was actually poisoned, the girl would have kicked the bucket first. Daphne asked if her uncle would believe her if she said she rushed over specifically to save the kids. Lias stared at his niece, completely stunned. The twins headed out into the hallway with the butler. The man took a deep breath and reminded the brothers that they heard the Marquis's words themselves. He's already having a hard time with the lady's antics, so he'll be even more bummed out if his own sons are the same way. So the butler told the boys to head back to their room. The twins hated upsetting their dad. The vibe in the mansion was super heavy, 'cause today's the anniversary of Lady Eileen's death. The twins figured they should suck it up and not make things worse for their old man, so they were doing everything Count Mentes said. But their sister hadn't done anything wrong. She was the first person to ever show them love, warmth, and any kind of comfort. Would it be right to ditch the sister who helped them feel all that, just because their dad's going through a rough patch? Besides, when a hero's around, he's gonna save anyone who's in trouble. The twins locked eyes and made up their minds quick. They weren't gonna take it anymore, so they threw open the dining room doors, even though the butler told them to scram. Marquis Lias looked at his sons, totally caught off guard. The boys stepped in front of their sister, begging their dad not to yell at her, saying she's a good person and saved them. The main character wondered why the twins were sticking up for her. The original story said they'd never argued with their dad before meeting the novel's heroine. Hermano explained that his sister didn't do anything wrong because it was Count Mentes who kept bringing up their mom. And then he'd say awful things about them. The Marquis was clearly surprised by this and asked his son, with disbelief, what he was talking about. Julius, trying to hide the tears welling up, said that the tutor always thought they were useless kids. According to Count Mentes, they shouldn't even have been born. The main character put her hands on Hermano's shoulder and gently asked him to stop. You don't need to remember that, even if the twins want to help. Just wanting to is enough. So, Hermano broke down crying, and Daphne gave him a big hug. Seeing that, Julius couldn't hold back the tears welling up either. He went over to the main girl too, and Daphne hugged both boys tight, trying to comfort and support them. Marquis Peregrine's icy tone made everyone flinch when he asked if Count Mentes had really hurt the kids. Daphne thought her uncle was angry before, but only now did she see Laius truly furious. Does this mean that until today, her uncle had never really been mad at Daphne? Count Mentes, sitting behind bars, raged, asking if they'd all lost their minds. They just threw him in jail, and yet he kept insisting he never threatened the young masters. The dungeon door creaked open, and a cloaked figure appeared in the doorway. Count Mentes perked right up, figuring this guy had been sent to him straight from the Imperial Palace. He got even happier when he saw the glass being offered to him. Thinking it was water, the dude chugged the whole thing in one go. Then he asked his savior to bring him some more water, 'cause he'd been starving for days and was parched. But Count Mentes froze solid the second the guy took off his cloak. Daphne greeted her old teacher with a smile, letting him know she'd prepared the biggest glass just for him. The Count, totally stunned, asked the lady why she was there. The girl answered slyly that she was super worried, that's why she came. But the guy knew damn well that was BS, and Lady Peregrine was after something else entirely. A sudden thought hit him, and he looked at the glass with dawning horror. Daphne said she decided to try out her new medicine, since he's gonna kick the bucket soon anyway. But the pain you inflict on kids? Nothing compares to that. Mentes clutched his throat and started begging for someone to save him. Then he just collapsed on the floor. The main character looked down at him with disdain, thinking what a pathetic loser he was. She really wanted to give him poison, but she knew how that would end, so she just brought him regular water. Mentes was easy to fool because of his messed up beliefs, but the girl's anger wasn't something you could just wash away. Daphne said, annoyed, that she still needed to take his legs, so he couldn't walk anymore. Suddenly, she froze, seeing a familiar face in front of her. Laius Peregrine stared intently at her. The main character was totally confused about why her uncle was there, wondering if he'd heard everything. Now Laius is gonna think she cooked up poison or was about to hack off the teacher's legs. But the Marquise just kept standing there. Daphne was all set to explain what she was doing, but her uncle just turned around and left, without even going into the dungeon. She totally wasn't expecting that. She asked her uncle, all flustered, if he wasn't going to check the cell, since she'd just come from the prison where they're holding Count Mentes. He deserves what's coming to him, so she could have done something to him. The Marquis asked his niece to come see him. Then the man headed to his study. The main character followed him. She stopped dead at the doorway, totally expecting to get reamed out. Suddenly, the girl spotted a book on the coffee table. Laius said she could look at it and explained it was Count Mentes's diary, found at his estate. As soon as Daphne knew who it belonged to, she started flipping through it. She knew Mentes hated Laius with every fiber of his being, but she had no idea it was this bad. Daphne couldn't believe anyone could treat little kids like that. Laius thought he was on the right track, but he didn't realize his open heart was giving his enemy an opening to strike. He was sure the kids were following him this whole time. But without looking around, the guy had no clue how much pain his own kids were going through, or what they were hearing. Laius apologized to his niece for doubting her and for not being able to answer right away when she asked about trust. He wasn't saying this as her uncle, but as just another person. Daphne remembered that Laius had never done that before. But listening to him, the main character could say with complete certainty that the man wasn't lying now. She couldn't believe Laius was saying such kind and sincere things to her. Daphne told her uncle that he could give her a reward as an apology. If she really wanted to marry Roderick Evans, Laius promised he would definitely help make it happen. But all she asked was to eat together with the kids at least 3 times a week. Her uncle clearly wasn't expecting that kind of request. Laius was surprised that his niece didn't want to talk about her engagement to Roderick Evans. Daphne didn't know how to explain it, so she just told her uncle she wasn't in love with Roderick anymore. She realized it after she almost died because it wasn't love, just a stupid obsession. Right now, Daphne genuinely regretted what she'd done. She gave up on her dream of becoming a saint and now just wants to live life for herself if she can. Laius thought about her request. The main character decided to ask Marquis Peregrine if he blamed his kids for his wife's death. The man immediately perked up and asked how anyone could even think that. He was really hurting from losing Eileen, but he knew perfectly well it wasn't the kids' fault. The man's eyes widened as soon as the main character told him they didn't know that. The twins are having a rough time too, but the Marquis still wasn't responsible for what happened with Count Mentes. That's why Daphne asked them to not drift apart from her kids anymore. The Marquis and the twins grew distant because of misunderstandings, but someone's got to make the first move to patch things up. And she really wanted her uncle to be the one to do it. Laius Peregrine totally agreed with his niece, so he promised he would. Daphne wasn't expecting her uncle to ask her to join them for meals too. She awkwardly replied that it'd be a little weird if she joined in on their family get-togethers. But the Marquis reminded her that she's a Peregrine too. Originally, Daphne thought her family didn't love her, didn't acknowledge her, and looked down on her. But maybe Daphne had no idea about her family's true feelings. Laius asked to send the invitation through the butler as soon as the date was set. Daphne decided to ask her uncle how he found out she went to the Wayne district. The Marquis explained that Lady Flora heard it from the servants and told him everything because she was worried about the kids. In other words, Flora was trying to get under her skin again. Daphne even paid that guy and he just had to blab everything. The girl explained to her uncle that she needed to buy some medicine in that area because she hadn't fully recovered yet. Laius doesn't trust her completely yet, which means she can't tell him the whole truth. The Marquis cleared his throat as soon as his niece revealed that she knew about his trip to the black market for medicine for her. Turns out she was out of it for days, and even various medicines and priests couldn't help. That was surprising, considering the Peregrine family doesn't have a great relationship with the church. Laius asked Daphne to never pull a stunt that reckless again. A warm smile spread across his face when the girl promised not to do it again. Daphne tensed up the second her uncle said he'd tell Lady Flora about this, just to clear the air. He turned away, letting his niece go. But Daphne stopped him like she had something to say and pointed at the diary. From what she read, our girl learned that Count Mentes had been trying to cope with some trauma from an incident involving her uncle through prayer. And Lady Flora was the one who listened to the aristocrat's prayers at the temple. So the big question was, did the woman who brought Mentes here really not know anything? In an icy tone, Laius promised to handle it. Truth be told, our main character didn't know if Flora was in on it or not. But since she threw the first punch, Daphne decided to return the favor. That girl just couldn't let injustice slide, even if it meant kicking the bucket. Miss Flora asked the maid how things were going and heard that the Marquis and his lady weren't doing so hot. The woman waved her hand, dismissing the servant. She was pleased because it seemed like Daphne had landed herself in a pickle again. Flora specifically brought Mentes in to whip those kids into shape, not let them screw around. But hey, at least Laius didn't figure out she was mixed up in it somehow. The maid opened the door and timidly told the miss that Mr. Peregrine was calling for her. A joyful smile instantly bloomed on Flora's face, but it faded pretty damn quick. The Marquis told her he intended to let the young masters off the hook from their studies. Recent events made Laius rethink his kids' education, so he made the call. The woman couldn't believe the Marquis was kicking her out after all the loyal service she'd given this house. Flora threatened that the imperial family would be the first to object to this. But Laius knew that perfectly well, and that's exactly why he wasn't going to fire her. If Flora wasn't going to be their teacher, and she wasn't getting fired, she had no idea what she was supposed to do here. The woman begged him to seriously reconsider this decision. But the Marquis wasn't about to repeat himself, so he threatened to call the guards if she didn't leave right then. Flora flinched at the Marquis's icy tone. Leaving Laius's office, she grabbed her head, not understanding what any of this meant or why it was happening to her. If things kept going this way, she wouldn't reach her goal, and the former empress wouldn't let her off the hook. That stuck-up Daphne totally screwed things up, so now Flora has to stage another incident to earn Laius's trust again. The lives of two people are riding on this. Right now, the plants seem pretty basic, considering Daphne's a newbie and grew them so easily. It's been a whole 4 days since the main character talked to Laius. Meanwhile, Mentes has pretty much lost it after Laius punished him. Ever since that guy who was messing with the kids disappeared, they've started smiling again. Daphne's a little worried about Flora's silence, but figures she's just laying low for a while. Even though the heroine planted the seeds pretty recently, all kinds of different herbs sprouted up super fast. But one of the plants looks kinda rough. Mary said it's super sour, but also kinda tasty. It's supposed to be great for kids, so her parents always gave it to her when she was feeling under the weather. But because of how the plant looked, Mary would always throw a fit and refuse to eat it. Still, it really does taste good, and it helped the maid's sister grow up big and strong. Even so, looking at that flower just kills your appetite. People use it to keep colds away, plus it's a little tart and kids dig it. Suddenly, our girl had a brilliant idea. A few days later, Daphne headed to the library. The twins immediately tagged along, wanting to hang out with their little sis. Julius wasn't about to admit that, though, so he just mumbled something about how you can't slack off on your studies. Daphne patted him on the head and offered to check how hard he'd been studying. In the boy's hands, she saw the second part of an incredibly complex book she didn't understand. The main character started to doubt that Julius understood any of it, but teacher Benit had been explaining it all to him, so the boy decided to share it with his sister. The book was covered in drawings and notes from the teacher's stories, with a ton of spelling mistakes. Daphne didn't know how to react to that, so she just said he was studying hard. Elias dropped the book as soon as his sister suggested he brush up on his spelling. Noticing the kid's downcast look, Daphne awkwardly admitted that she used to make a lot of mistakes too. All this time, Hermano had been carefully watching his sister while she explained to his brother how to spell words correctly. He decided to ask her when she suddenly got so smart. Daphne confessed that she actually had a reason for her sudden glow-up, but it's totally top secret. Still, she decided to share with her brothers and pulled a mysterious little pouch out of her pocket. The twins stared at it, totally surprised. As soon as the guys saw what was inside, they immediately guessed it was candy. Julius thought it was fishy, so Daphne told him not to even bother trying it if he was gonna be like that. But the kids still decided to give it a shot. Hermano loved the taste, but Julius instantly made a face because it was super sour. A warm smile spread across the main character's face because her plan worked. Truth is, Daphne just gave them a kid's vitamin supplement. In this world, medicine mostly comes in powder form since pills are less effective and taste like crap. But if you turned medicine into candy, it'd be way easier to swallow, the texture would be better, and you could guarantee a decent flavor. In other words, nobody in this world has figured out that kind of tech yet, which means this idea is a goldmine waiting to happen. Out of nowhere, Hermano asked what these candies were called. Now Daphne was starting to feel guilty about trying to rip off the name. Since it's made from Portapo slime, the girl called the candies Popos. The kids thought the name was cute, like a little puppy. Daphne glanced at the magic diagram drawn in the book and asked Hermano if it was too complicated. If it was too tough, she offered to ask his dad for help, since he's an expert in that field. A look of surprise mixed with longing flashed in the kid's eyes. Still, he didn't want to bother his dad at work, especially since he hadn't said a word at dinner for the last few nights. Daphne patted the kid on the head, telling him that wasn't true at all. She assured Hermano that the Marquis would definitely be happy he came. A warm smile spread across the kid's face, and he believed his sister. Ulyss immediately jumped off the couch, shouting that he wanted to ask their dad something too, so he was going as well. That's when the main character suggested they all go together. Lias is glad the Mentes issue got resolved and didn't blow up into a full-on turf war. A smile crept onto the man's face because he wouldn't have to deal with any more hassles. But dinner 2 nights before proved otherwise. The Marcus figured the kids just didn't want to eat dinner with him. Let's be real. Kids have a hard time sitting next to someone they don't vibe with, so maybe we should ditch the family dinners for now. Just then, Daphne poked her head into the study. She was about to bring up the dinners, and Lias mentioned he was actually planning to talk about it too. The Marquis suggested they stop having dinner with the kids altogether. The main character was totally taken aback by that statement. Lias knew the kids weren't comfortable around him, so he suggested having dinners that were more chill for everyone. But the dude clammed up the second Daphne swung the door open wider, and he saw the twins standing there. She explained that the kids had been studying in the library and wanted to ask the Marquis something about magic diagrams. Out of nowhere, the boys started apologizing to their dad for putting him in an awkward spot. They were about to bail, but the Marquis stopped them, saying it was just a simple misunderstanding. Lias is genuinely happy his sons came to him. He's been waiting for this moment for a long time. So, the man asked them to let go of any hard feelings and ask him anything they want. The Marquis reached out his hand and invited the kids to come closer. The man saw a note in his son's book saying he wanted to be as great a swordsman as his father. Lias was floored by this revelation. He gave his kids a big hug. A few days passed, and the atmosphere in the dining room was way better. No more awkwardness at all. And Lias started chatting with the kids during dinner. The main character's stoked that they're finally gonna be a normal, happy family again, like they should be. Out of nowhere, a maid walks up to Daphne and tells her she just got a letter. "The cake you ordered, my lady, is ready for pickup." But she didn't order any cake, which means this message might be from that shadowy figure. She asked her uncle if she could leave the estate for a bit, promising not to cause any more trouble. Lias suggested firing the personal baker right away if she's not happy with him. But the main character refused, saying she just wanted to try something different. Hermano gave his sister a hard look and asked if she was planning on seeing that guy Roderick again. Daphne was confused why they were talking about him again. Taking a deep breath, the Marquis gave Daphne the okay, but told her to be back before sundown. Overjoyed, the main character thanked her uncle. Mary seemed like a pretty good girl to Daphne, especially since she even took care of her clothes. The man greeted the lady and said he was glad she found him. Daphne smirked and asked if it was even possible not to find him. Luciel smiled, realizing the lady knew who sent her right away, so the rumors about her being dumb were BS. The main character asked the man what he managed to dig up. Turns out the poison was definitely ordered from the Assassin's Guild, but the guy who placed the order is already pushing up daisies. Daphne figured that would be the case. The client was probably someone with serious juice. Luciel gave the lady a hard look when she casually said that was pretty much what she expected. The girl asked the guy if he'd checked the antidote, and he confirmed she was right. The guy suggested they start selling the antidote, but Daphne said nobody would buy it if it had her name on it. Medicine is one of those fields where trust is everything. Luciel asked the lady if she'd already figured out where to move her product. The temple would never accept a magic elixir from the Peregrine family. They hate magic and turn down any offers from private pharmacists, so there's only one place to sell the stuff. We're talking about back channels, the black market. Luciel really needs her elixir, so he's got to nail down a contract with her, come out on top in negotiations. The guy said they'd have to think about the problem, but if she wanted, he was willing to help. But Daphne suddenly said she never mentioned anything about wanting to sell the medicine through him. Turns out the girl just wants to make an honest living. He wondered if the guy gets caught and thrown in jail, will he actually pay the price? She was gonna shut down anyone who doubted her elixir or got blinded by the gossip. Daphne was sure there was someone out there she could click with. Out of nowhere, the dude offered to help her find a decent partner. The main character said she'd really appreciate the help. The guy promised to find someone good and get back to her, then stood up and held out his hand. The main character put her hand in his. Daphne mentioned she was planning to hit up the market to try and find a business partner there. Not that she didn't trust him, but it's best to cover all her bases. Luciel stared intently at the lady. This girl had already turned down his offers multiple times, and he couldn't even read her. For some reason, the hero felt a knot in his stomach. Maybe it was a feeling of unease, or something else entirely. Truth be told, this girl has all the qualities that Luciel absolutely dislikes. As soon as the lady left, Gale appeared in the hallway. Luciel asked his assistant if there was even one partner more suitable for the lady than him, but Gale didn't know what to say. In reality, the prince didn't want Daphne to make a deal with anyone else. But the old plan won't work, which means Luciel needs to meet with this girl again. This time, the man intended to present himself in his original form. Luciel was already rehearsing his expression, 'cause this was seriously nerve-wracking for him. Daphne breathed a sigh of relief. She'd been freaking out every second that Dark Shadow might off her. She decided right then and there to never get involved again, and to resist any temptation to do things solo. Since the heroine bailed, saying she was headed to the bakery, we gotta grab something. One of the shopkeepers immediately greeted the girl with a big smile. Daphne told him she was looking for a remedy connected to the temple. She picked up one of the vials, and the merchant immediately exclaimed she'd grabbed a top-shelf elixir right away. The damage was only 20 gold coins, but that's way too steep. Either way, considering the size and location of this shop, it's the best one in the central square. But the owner emphasized his ties to the temple, so there's no way he'd risk making a deal with her. Daphne left the bottle, planning to move on. She decided to check out other spots, when a dude suddenly appeared next to her, making her jump. He's a big guy, but Daphne didn't even sense him coming. Suddenly, she froze as the hero picked up the same bottle, and the vendor quoted him 50 gold. So, this seller's trying to rip off his customer right now. Daphne decided not to draw attention since no one would want to buy that medicine for that price anyway, but this idiot was actually going to buy it. The main character wasn't about to let that happen. She didn't want to get involved, but she couldn't ignore the fact that there were scammers in her line of work. So she stepped forward and told the vendor he was a cheat. The price started at 20 gold, but it jumped to 50 in like 2 seconds. The merchant got all huffy, telling her she didn't even know what the elixir was. Said she had no right to set the price. The main character just smirked and said he was right about that. But she knew damn well you couldn't change a manufacturer's price, which meant it probably wasn't from the temple. The merchant demanded she stop bad-mouthing his store. Daphne decided to ask the guy if he'd gotten permission from the temple to change the price then. He swung at her, yelling that she had no business sticking her nose where it didn't belong. But the main character just brushed him off, not letting him get away with that crap. She coldly asked him how he dared try to pull a fast one on her. The merchant started shaking like a leaf the second he realized his customer was Lady Peregrine. Daphne promised to deal with his lying tongue later, but first he was going to face the wrath of the people. Just like our girl said, the crowd started getting riled up, demanding the con artist give their money back, pronto. That was enough, and Daphne was ready to bounce. But then, some weird pull made her turn around. She couldn't figure out why this guy's actions didn't match who he was supposed to be. Daphne rushed over to the stranger and told him to follow her before the crowd trampled him. Soon they were clear of the mob. They ran together, but for some reason, Daphne was the only one gasping for air. Daphne told the guy to watch his back from now on, so other people can't take advantage of him. And after that, she couldn't get another word out. The guy took off his cloak, and Daphne's first thought was that he was an angel. Suddenly it hit her. In this whole story, there's only one person with silver hair and red eyes. The imperial family's trademark was golden hair and sky blue eyes. But the second prince was different. With dazzling silver hair and burning red eyes, Luciel was the half-brother of the crown prince, Jin Namjoon. But he was exiled to the Magic Tower right after he got his dukedom, and then he died from some weird disease. The second prince asked the lady, looking guilty, if she was okay. Daphne said she was fine, just got a little dizzy for a sec. The guy gave her a warm smile and said that was a relief to hear. The girl wondered, did the side characters have to be so damn good-looking? Luciel introduced himself to the lady, and Daphne immediately bowed to his highness, giving her name. The second prince's lips stretched into a wide smile. That reaction surprised Daphne, since usually her name gets a totally different reaction from people. Plus, she was lower in status than him, but his highness was still treating her with respect. Anyway, the main characters gotta get back to the story. She wasn't about to get mixed up with the prince, since the original plot could get all messed up, so she said goodbye to his highness. Luciel immediately tried to stop her. He wanted to repay her for her help. If Daphne were from around here, this guy's insane good looks would totally floor her. But the girl just smiled and said she didn't need anything in return. Either way, the prince is the most handsome dude she's ever seen, but also super clueless. Trying not to look thrown, Luciel told the lady that he owned a magic tower, which meant he could help. But the main character turned down the offer, because there wasn't a thing the second prince could do. But for a split second, Luciel's eyes turned ice cold. The main character immediately noticed the guy's weird reaction, and he quickly said that an unwelcome guest was headed their way. Daphne froze when she saw the familiar face. Her eyes went wide as Roderick Evans approached. In the original story, this dude was the Saintess's love interest, and Daphne's ex-fiancé, the one she was totally obsessed with. A shiver ran through her body, probably a reaction to those memories. Roderick heard the lady was in rough shape, but for some reason, she's back to chasing after him. But Daphne couldn't care less about this guy, yet he keeps popping up in her life. So she took off her cloak and told him she doesn't want to marry him anymore either, because she's just not that into him anymore. Luciel's face immediately cracked a smirk. But Roderick didn't buy it, convinced she was just saying that because she got caught stalking him. Daphne reminded him that people can change their minds faster than he thinks. He dumped his fiancée himself, even after sharing some intense feelings. That's when Daphne Peregrine's love just fizzled out, like a candle in the wind. The main character asked Roderick if he didn't think he was the one acting totally out of pocket right now. Luciel couldn't hold back his laughter anymore. Roderick finally noticed the dude next to Daphne and snapped, "Who the heck is this guy?" The main character couldn't figure out how Daphne could ever be into him in the first place. Out of nowhere, the second prince stepped up to the lady and offered to help her out, saying he could finally return the favor. Nothing too bad could come of it, so Daphne gave him the go-ahead. With a smile plastered on his face, Luciel asked for his forgiveness. He dropped to one knee in front of the main character and, without warning, kissed her hand. And then he confessed that he'd been really looking forward to seeing her today. The lady kept the prince waiting way too long, so Luciel asked if she even knew how he felt. That statement totally froze her in her tracks. Of course, Roderick recognized His Highness right away. Luciel, with a smile, told the guy it was a pleasure to meet him. Roderick immediately bowed and apologized to His Highness for all the nonsense he'd been spouting. The Duke calmed him down, saying he wasn't exactly wrong. After all, Mr. Roderick wasn't the only one who noticed his feelings for the lady. Now Daphne realized this whole thing was just a takedown operation on Roderick, so she needed to snap out of it, fast. Beautiful Daphne, who used to chase after him all the time, is probably feeling pretty good about getting attention from the Duke and the tower owner. Even still, there's no way Roderick could ever tell anyone what happened today. They'd never believe him in a million years. It's a solid plan, which is why the lady suggested His Highness go along with it. As a final word, she told Roderick she hoped to never see him again. All the man could do was watch her walk away. He couldn't believe Daphne was actually with him. His subordinate immediately rushed over, touched his shoulder, and anxiously asked if he was all right, but Roderick yanked his arm away. He demanded to know how the guy dared to touch him. His first meeting with Daphne happened on a significant day, when the temple developed new painkillers. Young Roderick was super bored that day and didn't know what to do with himself. Out of nowhere, he saw this weird light coming from the goddess's fountain. The kid immediately decided he had to check out what was going on. Right in the middle, he spotted a girl with pink hair who looked totally out of it. He freaked, thinking she was a goner. So he was about to bail, but then the girl suddenly coughed. Before things got dicey, Roderick needed to make sure he wasn't walking into a trap. So he rushed over to the girl and asked if she was okay. Suddenly, the young lady gave a little smirk and said that he was the one who summoned her. Roderick froze, recognizing the stranger as Daphne Peregrine. Just then, more people started showing up near the fountain. Roderick's dad grabbed him by the shoulders, all freaked out, and was like, "What the hell happened here?" He yanked the kid's arm, saying the whole thing was off and they needed to bail ASAP because of that demon that vanished. But a few days later, Daphne Peregrine showed up in front of Roderick again. She was super grateful he'd saved her from eating concrete in that fountain. The girl was gorgeous, but Roderick would have been better off if she wasn't tainted with commoner blood. Out of nowhere, Daphne called Roderick her hero. After some serious wooing, and thanks to the Peregrine's noble bloodline, the two were soon engaged. But forget what you heard about Daphne being shy. Her obsession was straight up bonkers. So Roderick was totally blindsided when he found out she'd been messing around with the Duke. This was messed up, so the guy decided to get to the bottom of it. He called out to Daphne and reached for her. But the second prince's hand suddenly snatched hers away. Roderick, tense, asked His Highness to back off, but Luciel addressed him by name in a surprisingly gentle tone. Since Mr. Evans seems to have misread the room a little, the Duke felt it was his duty to offer some advice. Luciel leaned in close to the man's ear and quietly said that he'd been left behind. Roderick froze at those words. At first, the main character was worried, but everything went much smoother than she expected. Thanks to Luciel's intervention, Roderick won't be bothering her anymore. Daphne wanted to say a lot, but first she bowed to His Highness and thanked him. If he hadn't helped her, they'd still be stuck in that pointless argument. The Duke shouldn't get involved with her anymore, though. The main character reminded him that she's Daphne Peregrine. Luciel said in a sad voice that he thought what he did was the best way out of a tough spot. Daphne realized this guy doesn't know all the rumors going around. Truth is, the Duke really did her a solid, because after breaking off the engagement, she would have had to, entertain certain gentleman callers. But this guy gets absolutely nothing out of getting close to her. Daphne tried to explain to the Duke that he didn't do anything wrong, and that she was the one who asked for help. Luciel immediately lit up with happiness just from hearing those words. He looked more like a little puppy right then. It was so cute that she couldn't help but smile. The guy jumped, and Daphne wondered why his face suddenly changed so much. So the girl figured she must have that villainous look on her face again. Either way, all that's left is to file the paperwork to break off the engagement at the Imperial Palace. Out of nowhere, Luciel intertwined his fingers with the girl's hand. He said she had this really sweet scent, one he'd definitely smelled before. Just a few minutes ago, the second prince was acting all shy. It's like those old myths, where Daphne can't even touch him, no matter how much she wants to. The main character was horrified when she realized what she was even thinking about. Remembering Luciel's words, the girl had a sudden realization. She pulled some candies out of her pocket and asked the prince if that was what he was talking about. The girl said she makes these popo candies herself and they're super sweet. She popped one in her mouth to show the guy there wasn't any poison in them. But Luciel probably can't get full-on sweets, and he muttered to himself, wondering if his moves were totally failing. Daphne didn't quite catch that, though. She glanced at the time and realized it was getting pretty late. The main girl announced she had to get going and swing by the bakery before all the desserts were gone. Before leaving, she told Luciel not to worry about any rumors, because she'd shut them down. The Duke replied without thinking that she shouldn't bother. And then he asked the lady if she'd found a bakery yet. There's a good one near the fountain where the locals say they make amazing desserts. His Highness himself recommended the bakery, and the main character thought that was kinda cute. Then the girl took her leave, leaving the prince all alone. But actually, Gale was nearby and he couldn't hold back his laughter anymore. Luciel felt this irritation building up inside him because he couldn't figure out why Daphne Peregrine wasn't falling head over heels. His dazzling good looks always worked, no exceptions. Nobody in this world had ever resisted one of his, shall we say, most effective charms. So right now, Luciel was totally baffled. He decided to ask Gale if he was missing something he just wasn't aware of. Seeing his boss so stressed, Gale didn't even know what to say. Luciel sat on the couch in the room, carefully examining the candy Lady Peregrine had given him. She's supposed to be the villain, but she's got candy in her pockets. The Duke remembered the day someone offered him a piece too. Back then, a girl came up to him and asked why he was sitting alone when everyone else was having fun. She held out a candy, saying it would help him forget the pain for a while. Something about her weird expression triggered long-lost memories. He thought he remembered a sweet scent coming from her, but this smell was different. Luciel made up his mind. He wouldn't let that elixir fall into the wrong hands, and he'd do whatever it takes to get it. When nobody was looking, the man swallowed the candy. Soon after, the main heroine returned to the estate. Mary filled in her mistress, letting her know a young master had arrived not too long ago. Daphne knew right away they were talking about her uncle, Laius Peregrine's younger brother, Cian Peregrine. Unlike Laius, he's a genuinely kind and considerate guy, and he's the only one who never gave up trying to build a warm relationship with the family. Of course, no one, including Daphne, had any idea about Cian's real feelings. Suddenly, the main character heard footsteps coming her way. It was Cian's wife, Rivnal Peregrine. She's just as kind as her husband and always treats even the villainous Daphne with warmth. But in the novel, this wonderful pregnant woman tragically loses her baby. It's hard for Daphne to see Rivnal now, knowing what's coming and feeling powerless to stop it. Rivnal apologized to the girl for not arriving sooner, explaining the news took a while to reach the sanatorium. She tried to get here as fast as possible, but she wasn't feeling too hot. The main character just couldn't figure out why this woman was being so nice to her. Rivnal Peregrine was happy to see that Daphne was doing okay. She didn't want to be a total pest, but she hoped she could see the lady sometimes while she was staying at the estate. Daphne remembered a scene from the original story and realized that after that incident, Rivnal saw her as the villain. That's why she was the one who suggested having dinner together with Cian Peregrine's wife. The main character had just stocked up on a bunch of sweets anyway. Besides, Daphne didn't really have any friends to share a meal with. Rivnal was surprised that she was actually allowed to eat together with the lady. Daphne nodded, and Cian's wife promised to make tea, saying she'd just brought back some fancy tea leaves from the resort. It's not like our girl could change what's coming for this woman, but it still sucks knowing she's gonna get caught in the crossfire. Rivnal really dug the cookies the heroine brought. Daphne, a little flustered, said they were from her favorite bakery. The woman asked how she was feeling, and Daphne said she was doing a lot better now. But our girl could tell Rivnal was fishing for something else. She quickly figured it out and told her she'd be calling off the engagement with Roderick soon. Besides, Daphne wasn't about to repeat the same dumb mistake and had no intention of, checking out early. Hearing that, Rivnal immediately felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was weird. Roderick was always distant with Daphne, but he hid it pretty well behind a facade. In other words, nobody ever suspected him of cheating. Daphne told her aunt she didn't remember much since waking up. So she decided to ask why she was so against her engagement to Roderick. Rivnal said she overheard him talking with other club members. He was saying all kinds of nasty things about her. So Rivnal didn't think the guy would ever change, even after getting married, and she was really worried about it. Daphne knew perfectly well you can't change a person, but now she felt relieved, knowing the guy's true colors. So the main character was grateful to her aunt. Rivnal was happy that Daphne made the right call and put an end to it. She could finally breathe easy. Rivnal's light brown hair and kind eyes reminded our main character of a squirrel. But the woman was super thin, even though she took such good care of herself and got the best treatment. A maid walked up to the table and Rivnal announced it was time for their medicinal tea. It's great for pregnant women and just women in general. Rivnal said her doctor prescribed it and offered the lady some too. The tea smelled nice, and the aroma was really familiar to Daphne, like grain. But our girl froze as soon as she realized what was in that so-called healing tea. Daphne put the cup down and asked her aunt if her personal doctor really prescribed this drink. Rivnal nodded and said he went to great lengths, found the tea overseas just for her. She's been drinking it ever since she left the mansion, so like 2 months now. If you dig into the memories, Rivnal's health took a nosedive about a month ago. That's why Cian took her away for treatment. Still, the reason she's gone is because she kept drinking this tea. Maybe it's what caused the miscarriage. Daphne asked for permission to see this doctor, since she hasn't been feeling too hot lately. The girl reassured her it wasn't that bad, and Rivnal said you can find the healer in his 3rd annex. Starting today, he began monitoring her condition. Daphne thanked her aunt, mentally cursing that shameless creep for coming all the way to the estate. The guy just didn't get these rich folks. Spencer was stoked about that monthly paycheck the woman offered. On top of that, these clothes might actually end up as part of a temple outfit someday. He jumped when someone hammered on the door. The guy threw open the door and demanded to know who was banging on his door like that. Spencer froze when he saw Daphne Peregrine standing right there. He immediately started apologizing to the lady. The main character wanted to know more about that special tea he gave her aunt, and asked him to give her some too. The guy hedged, saying it would be tricky. He knew he'd be in deep trouble if the lady found out what that tea really did. But if he refused her, Daphne would get even angrier, and that would look way more suspicious. So Spencer hands her this little pouch. He tells her to mix it in water or milk, says it'll taste way better that way. As soon as the guy's gone, Daphne rips open the pouch and tastes what's inside. Her hunch was right, it's definitely Job's tears seed powder. That stuff can mess with a pregnancy, so expecting mothers have got to be super careful with it. Now, thanks to that snake oil salesman, a pregnant woman is still putting herself at risk, and that's a huge problem. The big shot who's got the connections to import Job's tears powder could be Miss Flora. No proof, but Daphne's got a really bad feeling about this. Guess she's got to dig a little deeper and find out what's going on. The maids swing the door open, all pissed, and demand to know how Mary dares slack off. The girl said that Milady brought a whole mountain of desserts, so the rest of the maids can try them too. The maids decided to take the desserts, saying it was the price of their silence. Since Mary's always stuck in the annex, this is the first time she's had a chance to actually talk to someone from the main palace. One of the girls decided to share the hottest gossip about Miss Flora with Mary. Turns out, Daphne learned that this woman's been crushing on her uncle for ages. Flora makes her feelings pretty obvious whenever she meets with Marquis Lias. If this woman's love is unrequited, the Marquis's coldness must be eating her up inside, which means she's capable of doing something bad. Slip in some poison, plant recipes that are harmful to the pregnancy. Flora's the only one who could pull something like that. The main character decided to set a trap. Cian asked his dear wife how she was feeling today. Rivnal replied that their little one was developing well, so she was also doing great with the treatment. But it really hurt her to see the sad look on her husband's face. He needed to be strong for them right now. Just then, the main character walked into the room with a tray in her hands. Cian was super surprised when his niece suggested they all have dinner together in the main hall. Then Daphne handed her uncle some tea and said it was specially for Aunt Rivnal. The main character added that someone else would be joining them for dinner, and she suggested her uncle get a second opinion from another doctor about Rivnal's illness, since her condition was so unusual. Then Daphne left, and Cian was just standing there, completely lost. Out of the blue, Rivnal told her husband that Daphne was the first to offer her tea when she arrived, and on top of that, she treated her to tea and desserts. Shen realized it had been ages since he'd heard her call him uncle. Rivnal suggested they go to this dinner because it had been so long since they'd all had a family dinner together. The man tearfully promised to do as she wished. Soon, the maids were given a list of the nobles who would be attending the evening's event. Since important guests are coming, they need to make a good impression. That evening, Miss Flora returned to the estate, furious that Daphne had decided to throw a reception without her. Not since Eileen passed away has there been a banquet held at this estate. In other words, Lias is making moves to climb the ladder. What's worse, Cian and his wife are back. And even though Rivnel's saying she's recovered, like they're trying to prove something, her health's actually getting worse. It occurred to Flora that they might be planning to introduce a new lady of the house. Not on her watch, so she immediately went to Spencer's chambers to see what was going on. The guy wanted to know if the thing Flora promised to help him with was going well. If all goes according to plan, Spencer wants her to put in a good word for him, get him that temple doctor gig. Flora handed the guy his upfront payment and reminded him that he needs to take care of Rivnel's little problem. But she knew this idiot could never be a temple doctor, even if he pulls this off perfectly. Marlborough's maid walked in and announced that the banquet had already begun. That really ticked Flora off because not even all the guests had arrived yet, and they were already kicking things off. She couldn't wrap her head around why she wasn't invited. What really got her goat was the fact that the knights wouldn't let her into the banquet hall. Flora pointed at Spencer and demanded to know how everyone else got an invite, but he didn't. Besides, there's no way they wouldn't know who she is. She's here on orders from the Imperial Family Temple. The main character called out to Flora in a calm voice. The woman complained to the lady that the guards wouldn't let Spencer into the banquet. Daphne nodded to the two knights. They immediately took off. The main character stepped forward and told Flora she couldn't come in because the banquet was off. Sending out all those invites was a total pain, so Daphne decided to just have dinner with her family. Flora, looking confused, asked if that even made any sense. It just hit her then. Laius would never make a call that fast. The main character smirked and asked the miss how she even knew about this banquet. I mean, duh, Flora probably has a rat in the kitchen spilling all the tea. But since she got chewed out by her uncle and couldn't get in, she probably begged Spencer to sneak her into the banquet. So they're working together on this thing. They were giving Aunt Rivnel a special tea that could cause complications, hoping to, well, you know. Flora was clueless how Daphne figured all this out. She decided to play dumb and told the lady that Spencer was just her favorite student. Flora asked the guy, totally bummed, if he really gave Rivnel that Job's Tears seed concoction. Spencer immediately snapped back, telling her not to try and pin the whole damn thing on him. But Flora told the lady not to listen to his BS because you just can't trust commoners. That really set Spencer off, and he asked what about her saying Peregrine Manor was too good for Daphne. But Flora just kept denying everything. This went on until the banquet hall doors started to creak open. Flora shut her mouth the second she saw His Excellency and Lord Cian's grim faces right in front of her. A sword was instantly at the woman's throat. Flora tried to explain, but Laius warned her that if she kept lying, she'd die right there. She collapsed to the floor, and the Marquis ordered Flora Charlotte and Spencer locked up in the dungeon immediately. If the Imperial Palace or the temple asks what happened, tell them Flora tried to off a bunch of people. Once the woman realized this was for real, she started begging his lordship to hear her out. She froze when she heard Daphne's mocking voice behind her, wishing her all the best. Yeah, right. Now the main character knew that Flora was the one who hired the Assassin's Guild to poison her and slipped the poison to Rivnel. Daphne glanced at her uncle and noticed he was shaking like a leaf. He was horrified that Daphne and Rivnel's kid almost died because of him, so the Marquis demanded they get a doctor, ASAP. But Cian calmed his brother down because his wife was already safe. Daphne explained that she gave her aunt a different tea with a similar taste, one that's totally harmless for pregnant women. Shan genuinely thanked his niece for her help, but the heroine told him to save the thanks for later because right now she was starving. And what's more, the kids are starving too. The twins ran up to their sister, asking if they could finally eat. Rivnel showed up in the hallway, happy the whole family was finally together. Now that the guest of honor's here, the Peregrine family can finally dig in. Emperor Curtison asked how Lady Peregrine and her aunt were feeling. The Marquis replied that they were both completely safe now, and the baby was out of danger. The Emperor told Laius he could deal with Flora Charlottale and the doctor however he saw fit. The Marquis decided to remind him who Flora Charlottale had really been loyal to all along, the former Empress. Right now, the Peregrines are holding the line, but it's taking a lot of effort. Curtison informed the Marquis that he could lift the restrictions on the supply of magic stones from Peregrine territory, but for Laius, that's just not gonna cut it. The Emperor shot up from his throne, pissed, and demanded to know what kind of compensation he was after then. Turns out, Laius just wanted a do-over on the investigation into that poisoning incident at the banquet. He was gonna find out if his niece was really to blame. Because if the Emperor had just trusted his niece in the first place, none of this would have happened. Curtison knew this wasn't the time for a retrial. If his mother actually had it out for Lady Peregrine, then he'd have to step up. The emperor slumped back down on the throne, totally drained. Even if a new investigation pinned the blame on the former empress, the emperor still couldn't throw his own mother under the bus. But right now, Hella's risking losing something way bigger: her son's trust. Curtison had no idea the Marquis cared so damn much about his family. Laius thanked His Majesty and said he had to take his leave now. In the hallway, the guy ran into the former empress and gave her a polite nod. Hella was planning a tea party with some friends and invited the Marquise to join them, but Laius turned her down. He's got a crazy amount of work piled up today, so even a quick cup of tea is gonna be tough. Tea parties usually happen in the garden, which is a whole different vibe than this place. The fact that the former empress is inviting the Marquise means she's starting to catch on. Laius apologized to Her Highness, explaining he's not really a flower guy, just like his old man. The guy warned the former empress and her ladies-in-waiting that there have been a lot of nuisances roaming around lately. But the Marquis was dead set on catching them himself. Nobody messes with the Peregrine family. Hella plastered on a smile and apologized to the Marquis for keeping him waiting. Then she excused herself and walked away with her ladies-in-waiting. The teacup crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces. Hella was furious that that son of a gun Laius Peregrine dared to humiliate her, looking exactly like his father. She felt just as ashamed now as she did back then. This was the perfect chance to ruin the Peregrine family's reputation, but now the plan was on the verge of collapse. Hella wondered if Flora's actions had been suspicious. Now the former empress's plan, the one she'd poured years of hard work into, was in jeopardy. If they started a new investigation now, she'd lose the emperor's trust. She needed to change her approach. Hella summoned a servant. She asked her to fetch that disgraced noble, the one who got the title but became a gambling addict. Any old love-struck story will do as the reason. Soon enough, the investigation was reopened, and Lady Peregrine was cleared of all suspicion. Luciel figured the case was back on because they found evidence pointing to the real culprit. Or maybe the whole thing was a setup from the get-go. Either way, if the lady clears her name, they can finally meet in a more relaxed setting. Suddenly, in the magic mirror, the dude saw Daphne Peregrine was on her way to see him. Come to think of it, it's been a minute since they last saw each other. In a dejected voice, Gale asked his master if he really had to do this. He couldn't figure out how he was supposed to act like he was in charge in front of a high-class lady. She'd see right through him. But Luciel just tossed him a cloak and told him to say the head of the magic tower could avoid the temple's oversight and penalties. Gale asked her to hold up. He wasn't ready for this yet. In a suspiciously smooth voice, the Duke said everything should go smoothly, then vanished into thin air. Gale transformed the instant he heard a knock at the door. Daphne took off her cloak and said it had been a while since they'd seen each other. She brought the samples the guy asked for, plus an upgraded version. One of the vials contained the same version the girl brought the first time. Gale blurted out nervously that he had a lot of questions about the effect, but quickly realized he was saying the wrong thing. But the lady didn't seem to notice anything was up. Still, her face was screaming suspicion. Gotta wrap this up quick before she gets wise to something. But out of nowhere, the lady drops a bomb. She's already found someone to sell the medicine. Daphne says his name is Duke Luciel. Gale flinched when he heard his master's name. He was gonna spin a killer yarn about his boss, but she just brought him up herself. Rumor has it the Duke's got some kind of rare affliction, so Daphne's asking if he knows anything about it. Gale said the second prince has been getting treated at the temple since he was a kid, but nothing's worked. Still, the guy couldn't figure out what she was getting at with all these questions. The hero tensed up, the thought hitting him that she might be trying to see through his disguise. Clearing his throat, Gale explained that His Highness had lived alone for quite a while. That's why he's a little different from other guys. Gale was trying to say that His Highness is a bit inexperienced. He doesn't really know anything about love or affection. Luciel has always treated her with respect and kindness, like he didn't have a care in the world. But because of a rare illness, he grew up away from his family when he was a kid. Maybe that's why Daphne smiles so genuinely and vulnerably around him. After all, she also craves that kind of love and knows that feeling of loneliness better than anyone. Man, that's a pretty messed up story. The man in the cloak asked the lady why she was asking about all this. The main character calmly replied that she'd decided to sell potions. Gale tried to stop the lady, but he just gaped, totally stunned, as soon as she revealed her buyer was named Luciel. The guy immediately complimented her taste and nervously admitted he'd wanted to recommend the same person. Gale offered to set up a meeting, but the main character turned him down flat. The girl knew what Dark Shadow was capable of doing to Luciel. Once Daphne settles this whole mess, she's cutting ties not only with Dark Shadow, but with Luciel too. She's gotta completely break away from the original storyline. The main character reminded everyone that she's Daphne Peregrine, the one they all fear. If she drops Dark Shadow's name to the Duke, it could raise some red flags, so she's gotta play it safe. Daphne's aiming for an exclusive deal with Luciel, so she asked her for forgiveness. Before leaving the room, she paused at the door and gave the guy a suspicious look. Guess he wasn't planning on walking her out this time. Probably because he's feeling under the weather. Even the Dark Shadow can get sick, you know? Daphne offered him some medicine, just to try and repay him somehow. Then she left the room. Gale ripped off his cloak and felt instant relief, like it was never gonna end. One way or another, he smoothed things over with the contract and got the last vial of elixir. Gale yelped in terror when Luciel popped up out of nowhere, asking how it went. The guy begged him not to appear so suddenly, said he still had a weak heart. The brunette told the boss he'd secured his meds for a little while. Also, Milady pointed out that the last vial has the old formula, but the rest are the upgraded version. Luciel frowned and asked if she'd said anything else. Gale noticed the master seemed to be waiting for something, so he revealed that the lady wants to make a deal with him. More specifically, with the Duke from the Magic Tower. Luciel couldn't help but crack a grin. The second prince headed for the exit, eager to meet with Milady, who was probably waiting on the first floor. However, Gale said she decided to set up the meeting herself. In other words, Lady Peregrine just bounced. Gale suggested the boss take a look at the medicine samples the girl brought them first. If everything goes smoothly and Luciel can figure out the ingredients, he won't have to worry about Milady anymore. Gale was right, but for some reason the Duke was kinda hoping things would go south. He downed the whole thing in one gulp. The guy shuddered and a smirk crept across his face. Turns out, Daphne Peregrine tweaked the ingredients and the concentration to weaken the effect. She didn't want to hand over 5 vials of the real deal to someone she hadn't locked down a contract with yet. Luciel quietly wondered how he couldn't be interested in her after that. But it's a little unfair that he's the only one feeling these feels, so the guy wanted Daphne to experience them too. He was sure nobody could resist this mug. Daphne told Luciel she'd meet up with him sometime, but honestly, this was the only place that popped into her head. She overheard some high society ladies gossiping about how His Highness comes here all the time. If you believe what they're saying, he's so angelic you'd want to drop to your knees and pray. Out of nowhere, the ladies started talking about the latest scandal in the papers. They couldn't wrap their heads around how Lady Flora, who everyone calls the Temple Angel, could do something so messed up. One of the girls guessed that maybe the noble lady was just taking the fall for someone else. In other words, they're trying to rewrite history and make Daphne look like the bad guy, even though she already has a terrible rep. A sudden gust of wind whipped around their table, spilling tea all over their dresses. The main character was actually surprised by the whole scene. Suddenly, Luciel appeared right next to her. He signaled her to keep quiet, so the other ladies wouldn't start a ruckus. Daphne was totally caught off guard when he asked her to call him by his middle name, Roz. But, usually only close friends or lovers use a middle name, so Daphne wasn't sure if she was cool enough to do that. It feels a little weird calling him that, but the name sounds awesome and it totally fits him. Daphne noticed he'd gotten even hotter since the last time she saw him. The guy mentioned the weather was killer today, he just hadn't been out in ages. The girl figured he must have been feeling pretty rough if he couldn't even get out for a walk, so she asked him to tag along with her. Today's the perfect day to chill with someone over a cup of tea, so Roz was stoked to accept the offer. On the outside, the guy looks totally healthy, but his magical ailment is seriously bugging Daphne. The girl felt guilty as hell for trying to rope such an innocent dude into a contract. Daphne jumped when Rose made this weird noise. Then he started coughing like crazy, totally freaking her out. Once the fit was over, Rose apologized to the lady. He explained that the Emperor's meds weren't doing jack for him, and that's why he was suffering. If there was some kind of cure, things would be way better. The girl started feeling like a real jerk because she was trying to cut a deal with a sick guy just to benefit herself. She decided to put the deal on hold and told Rose about her knack for making medicine. Daphne knew it was tough for him to trust someone he barely knew, but she swore the medicine really worked. Without a second thought, Rose asked her to give it to him. Then another coughing fit hit him, and he weakly called out to her. Daphne was freaking out. Rose was clearly in agony, and at this rate, he might kick the bucket. She shoved the medicine into his hand, telling him to chug it all down. The main character ordered him, all serious, to tell her if he felt anything weird. The Duke did exactly what Daphne told him to do. She immediately asked if he felt anything off, and the guy admitted he was feeling a little strange. He froze the second Daphne got close and touched his forehead. As she stared intently into his eyes, Luciel's heart started pounding like crazy, getting faster every second. The main character concluded that he didn't have a fever. Still, she couldn't figure out why Rose's face was so flushed. The moment she called him by his given name, the dude went even redder. Daphne tensed up because the guy's temperature was starting to spike. She figured she should call a doctor ASAP, cause these side effects were seriously bugging her out. But Luciel stopped her, quietly explaining that he was just surprised. Roz explained that he was just surprised and for some reason his temperature just went up on its own. Daphne was relieved her medicine wasn't the problem because now she could chill a little. The girl sat back down at the table and in a serious tone told Roz she wanted to make him an offer. She'd heard he'd been suffering from a chronic illness for a long time. Luckily her medicine helps, which means she could keep him supplied with the stuff. The guy asked, surprised, if she'd really do that for him. Roz sincerely thanked the lady, and she caught herself thinking again about how handsome he was. Daphne explained that the rumors about her were way overblown. Plus, Roz had actually helped her out big time before, so she wanted to pay him back. Daphne's face lit up like a Christmas tree the second the guy asked her to take care of him. Luciel decided to ask the lady if there was anything else he could do to help her out. The main character couldn't believe her luck was turning around so fast. He smiled and mentally called Daphne cute. The man jolted, like he'd been shocked, as soon as he realized what he'd just been thinking. He wondered, weren't those the kind of cheesy lines the heroes in Gale's favorite romance novels threw around? Luciel couldn't believe such lame thoughts had just crossed his mind. Out of nowhere, Daphne mentioned her plan to open a small salon. The Duke didn't get her game plan. There's no way she'd be able to hire anyone, not with her, complicated reputation. But our girl was dead set on pouring her skills into making this salon something special. And calling it a healing salon, no less. Lately, everyone in the Empire's been on edge, and it's all because the Crown Prince took off. Opening a salon that treats both your mind and body, and name-dropping some goddess from the old stories at a time like this? That's gonna stir things up. She's gonna load that place up with every comfort she remembers from her old life. Plus, if she starts selling those remedies Daphne's been cooking up, the salon's gonna blow up even bigger. On top of that, she's planning to offer premium memberships for clients who want the VIP treatment. In other words, Daphne's about to hit the freaking jackpot, guaranteed. That's why she asked Rosa for a fire mage, someone who can charge up that huge, flat mana stone. Since Roz is a wizard, the girl was really hoping he could help her out. Luciel thought she was smart, but planning to open a salon just shows how incredible this woman is. However, he warned Milady that making a magical artifact wouldn't be cheap. But a fire mage is gonna cost you a pretty penny, because they're super effective and in high demand. Smirking, the girl told him not to sweat it. In places where it's always snowing, or where the coastal winds are brutal, you can make a killing. And if we can make small, lightweight artifacts that can be attached to clothing, sales are gonna skyrocket for sure. Every winter, the capital's aristocrats will be lining up to buy these magical gadgets. The main character also asked the guy if she could sell her medicines under his name. If Roz lends his name for a while, Daphne can give him back a bigger cut of the profits later. And if a guy actually listens to her requests, they might even sign an addendum to the contract. Whether the medicine gets good buzz after it's sold or not, Daphne's gonna push it under the Rose brand. Luciel smirked and said he was digging it. The guy decided to ask where the lady was planning to open her amazing salon. The main character awkwardly replied that she wasn't sure about that just yet. But maybe she'll do it in the area that's famous for its health and wellness resorts. For Daphne, it would be great to live a life that's different from the original story. Out of nowhere, Luciel asked coldly if she was planning on heading there too. The main character replied that she had no intention of doing that at all. For some weird reason, the guy instantly felt a wave of relief wash over him. Daphne Peregrine had one last, super important question: how to find a manager. Luciel instantly knew what was bugging her, so he cut to the chase. Was she looking for someone to run her business? He froze the second Daphne said she was thinking about hiring a guy. One of the key requirements was that he had to be substantial. Out of nowhere, a strong wind kicked up, even though it had been dead calm. In a suspiciously smooth voice, Rose told the lady that he just happened to know the perfect guy, who'd just recently become available. Because of his impressive physique, it's not so easy for him to land a new gig. Rose could guarantee this guy would follow any order to the letter. Right then and there, a shiver ran down Gale's spine, and he didn't even know why. Before heading home, the girl decided to grab some desserts for Aunt Rivnel first. Roz opened the door, letting the lady go ahead. Even with all the darkness around, people in this world still got good manners, which can really throw you off. A waiter immediately came up to the heroine and started giving her the once-over. Then he just straight up told her that this place was pretty pricey, so maybe she'd like to take a look at the pre-packaged desserts. They made them yesterday, but they taste just as good as the fresh stuff, totally. Just then, Liza Caparol walked into the place. The waiter heard a big spender and immediately ran over to serve the high-class lady. Lady Caparol was saying how the holy water from the temple, from Count Evans, saved her after that whole ordeal. Now the person responsible is facing the music, and her family's clearly given up on trying to make her a decent human being. If the real Daphne were here, she'd have already ripped that girl's hair out, but our heroine decided to keep a low profile. But out of nowhere, Liza pipes up, saying if it were her, she'd have kicked that girl off the family tree ages ago. The lady was bummed her dad let the whole thing slide, but she figured she'd corner him about it later. Our girl was getting seriously ticked off because she'd just patched things up with her uncle, and this lady was trying to wreck it again. Daphne was done putting up with this crap. So she grabs a saucer and smashes it on the floor to get everyone to look at her. Liza Caparol immediately squawks, "What was that noise?" Daphne apologized to the lady for trying to get her attention so she could join in on their fascinating conversation. But the aristocrat was totally outraged and snapped, "How dare a commoner be so insolent to me?" Luciel's gaze went ice cold, and he immediately looked towards the window. Just then, it flew open, and a gust of wind blasted into the bakery. He yanked the hood off Daphne Peregrine, revealing his true colors to everyone. The main character couldn't figure out how the wind could have blown at exactly the right moment for that dramatic entrance. Lady Caparol dipped her head and told Lady Peregrine she had no idea she'd be here. Daphne agreed, because if she had known and still spoken out, it would have been like signing her own death warrant. Still, she didn't think she was wrong. She'd said 1,000,000 times there was nothing going on with Roderick. But Lady Peregrine didn't believe her and ended up doing her wrong. You'd think Lisa had covered all her bases, but Daphne could still find a loophole. Lady Caparol said that after the incident, her teeth were messed up and she's still on meds. But for someone with bad teeth, she sure picked some tough desserts. Lisa exclaimed that it was a gift for her family. The main character smirked and said this was a huge problem because she'd been played. The aristocrat was totally lost, like, what was Lady Peregrine even talking about? Daphne pointed to the ladies standing nearby and asked if Miss Caparol hadn't told them about Mr. Evans saving her. I mean, he even went and got holy water from the temple just for that. That stuff's super rare. Even the royal family can't get their hands on it. The fact it didn't work says a lot. Lisa awkwardly replied that wasn't what she meant at all. Then she indignantly asked her ladies-in-waiting when she ever said Mr. Evans gave her holy water. Lisa only mentioned that he had done everything he could to save her. Miss Caparol thought it was funny at first, but now she's embarrassed because she never actually got any holy water. Suddenly, Daphne froze, realizing that Lisa had recovered without the holy water. Caparol, the girl's father, that Marquis, straight up said his daughter was on death's door from poison. So the Peregrine family took Flora in, not daring to defy the Emperor's orders, and coughed up a huge payout. But this girl Daphne's looking at seems perfectly fine, considering she supposedly drank poison. Which begs the question, was she the only one who got a taste of it? Meanwhile, Miss Caparol apologized for the misunderstanding. Daphne calmly told Lisa that she always twists things around, which makes the other ladies get the wrong idea. Our girl still hasn't forgotten what Lady Caparol said about kicking her off the family tree a long time ago. Lisa forced a smile and apologized for even bringing up the registry. Then she made a beeline for the exit, and just like that, everyone in the bakery scrambled to get out of there, seeing the look on our girl's face. And just like that, Daphne and Rose were the only ones left in the room. The guy immediately grabbed the waiter who was trying to bolt and asked him real rough where he thought he was going. The Duke turned to the lady and asked if he did good. This dude had such a sweet smile, Daphne couldn't help but think he looked like a little puppy. Snapping out of it, the lady asked what she should do about staff who harass customers, then try to ditch. Lucille froze the second she added that the manager of this place was a major letdown. Then he twisted the waiter's arm and told the lady not to worry, because this place was about to have some new staff. The head chef stormed out of the kitchen, demanding to know where all the customers went. Daphne asked if he was the owner, and the guy said he was in charge and that apparently an employee had caused some trouble. The guy immediately apologized, which cooled the main character's temper a little. She explained she was just trying to order, but the server was being a real jerk, so the head chef offered to take her order himself. The main character pointed at all the desserts in the display case and told them to send the whole lot to the Peregrine estate. But, get this, that waiter guy has to deliver it. The head chef took the order, and the main character told Rose it was time for them to head out. Luciel adjusted his cloak and gave the head chef a suspicious look, sending chills down his spine. The main character grabbed Rose's hand and suggested they leave, so they wouldn't embarrass the staff. A warm smile spread across the man's face. As far as society's concerned, he's an abandoned member of the imperial family, a Grand Duke, and the master of the Magic Tower. But in the underworld, Luciel runs the Isle's black market and is the real owner of Rose's sweets. The question is, why does he even own a place like that? Simple. The aristos who come here are intel gold mines. Before Luciel knew it, they were already at the carriage stop. He knew he owed the lady an apology. The Duke was right there but couldn't do a damn thing, so she had to eat some serious trash talk. But Daphne pointed out he didn't let the employee who dissed her get away. He grabbed him with one hand. Luciel looked at his hand, surprised. Thinking back, he realized he'd grabbed the lady's ex's arm, even though he hates touching anyone. But ever since meeting Daphne, he keeps doing things that are totally out of character. All so the lady will be happy with what he does, because Luciel can't think about anything else. But the Duke knew she just saw him as a weak, socially awkward guy with zero romantic vibes. He thought that up until now there was at least some goodwill growing from the contact. But he's getting nothing back. Still, getting close to the lady right now is too risky. Gotta back off. But when he gets back, Luciel's gonna plow through all of Gale's sappy books to figure out his feelings. And maybe then he'll understand why he's acting this way. As soon as the lady left, Luciel pulled out the comm crystal and told Gale to get those romance novels ready, the ones where the hero is head over heels. He also told him to be ready to find a new job and prepare to work for the best boss in the world. Gale was floored by the news. Later that evening, Roderick heard that Lady Caparol had a falling out with Lady Peregrine. He was told that Lady Caparol had said some harsh things to Daphne, which is what started the fight. Roderick was certain he was the reason for the conflict. But the guy froze when he heard the fight started because of Lady Caparol's lies and what she said about the Peregrine family registry. Roderick couldn't believe the girls weren't fighting over him. Even though he wanted Daphne to finally leave him alone, the hero felt kinda lousy, like he'd been dumped. So Roderick ordered them to bring him all the holy relics from the black market that was opening in a few days. He was sure Daphne would be totally blown away by anything to do with holy relics. The hero would win back Daphne's feelings, and only then would he feel better. About a week had passed since then. Daphne had been busy all that time with the greenhouse and concoctions, and also keeping an eye on the twins' studies, so she was really swamped. Every day since that incident, the girl had been getting desserts from Rose's bakery. Turns out there were so many sweets, most of the desserts ended up being snacks for the Peregrine Estate's maids. They got to enjoy the treats, and Daphne cheered herself up in the process. The main character even told Mary she could take any dessert she wanted. Snapping out of her thoughts, the girl explained she just had a sudden memory of her family. They could never afford desserts this fancy, which made Mary a little sad. Daphne figures it's gotta be tough for the maid to work at such a young age, but she's still thinking about her family. Plus, Mary's been a huge help to the main character when mixing medicinal herbs. That's why Daphne decided to give her a present. She promised the maid she'd send home desserts that were even more over the top than these. Mary was super grateful to her mistress for being so thoughtful. Whatever Daphne was, she really did care about her people. Out of nowhere, the twins ran up to the main character and gave her a big hug. The kids came just to have some tea with their sister and hang out for a bit. Soon after, Aunt and Uncle Peregrine joined them. Of course, the main character didn't mind spending time with them, enjoying the delicious aroma of the tea. This day was supposed to be normal, but instead, it turned into something really warm and happy. Now, get-togethers like this had become a regular thing for the Peregrine family. The main character hopes these peaceful days will keep on going, but it looks like that's not in the cards. The butler ran up to them with news. Marquis Lias ordered the entire Peregrine family to gather in his study immediately. The main character was clueless about what was going on and why her uncle looked so bummed out all of a sudden. Lias handed Daphne the newspaper, and she started reading it real close. Breaking news. Lady Peregrine's supposed suicide attempt was actually murder, and Flora Charlotte was the one who did it. Turns out Russell Monzerix was the real poisoner at the banquet. His motive was his unrequited crush on the lady. Given these developments, the Imperial Palace is gonna send Lady Daphne Peregrine an official letter of apology. So, looks like the main character's name is finally cleared. Her aunt and uncle couldn't hold back their excitement and immediately started congratulating Daphne. The twins didn't even doubt that their sister was a hero. It's like a dream. Daphne herself grabbed Flora, but she didn't expect it to all get resolved so fast. It's almost like someone was putting the squeeze on the Imperial family. Thanks to this, Daphne's no longer going down the villain poisoning path like she did in the original story. Now that the threat's finally gone, the chances of her destiny playing out like the original story have dropped. From now on, Daphne just needs to steer clear of the main characters. The main character raised her hand, intending to say something to her uncles and aunt. She explained that she wants to take a short trip to the countryside. Her relatives were taken aback, and Laius immediately asked why she'd suddenly made that decision. Even though the accusations were dropped, people are still gonna look at Daphne sideways, so it's best to lay low for now. First things first, I need to meet with Duke Peregrine and get the seal on the documents to break off the engagement with Roderick. In this world, when someone wants to call off an engagement, you need the seals from both families. However, right now, the head of the Peregrine family is Duke Chadhan Peregrine. He lives in a place called Regarda with clean air and water, and he's definitely not moving to the capital. This is also where Chadhan's daughter and Daphne's mother, Amila Peregrine, went for treatment back in the day. Plus, it's a perfect fit for the business direction because you just can't find a better spot. Out of the blue, the Marquis said it'll take some time to prepare, since he needs to pick out servants and knights. Daphne tried to explain that just one maid would be enough for her, but Laius wouldn't budge. In the end, the main character gave in. It was already time, so Daphne got up from the couch and told her family she had to go, since she still had plans before leaving. She was planning on getting some fresh air on the way. Suddenly, the Marquis pointed out that she could get fresh air in the Peregrine garden, too. He was really worried that his niece was always taking off somewhere, like she wasn't comfortable with her family. The Marquis's face looked like the heroine's words had really stung him. Daphne explained she just wanted to check out the local cafes and bakeries before she left the estate, but her relatives still kept giving her the stink eye. The heroine ignored them and headed for the exit, wishing everyone a good day. Laius immediately ordered all the best pastry chefs in the Empire to be summoned to the estate, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Daphne decided to make some medicine for Luciel when she got back, since they wouldn't be seeing each other for a while. At that very moment, the Duke was reading romance novels. Gale still couldn't wrap his head around how he ended up working for Lady Peregrine. But he was bugged by why his boss kept making moves without giving him a heads up. Suddenly, Luciel slammed the book shut and told his assistant there was something he was curious about. Everyone in this book is messed up, but the main character takes the cake. He spends the whole story acting like he doesn't care about the girl, then just asks her to come back? Seriously? And the heroine's just as bad. If she's not feeling it, she just bails and doesn't give a damn about the guy anymore. Gale thinks the reason they're acting like this is because they're still hung up on each other, but Luciel remembers perfectly well that she said she doesn't love him, even though her actions scream otherwise. Gale explained that's the beauty of regret, where people split up only to find their way back together for good. Luciel pointed to the page where the kid shows up and asked why the guy wasn't jealous of him. From a guy's perspective, the heroine now has someone else she loves, which is obviously a rival situation. So, you could argue that she's fallen out of love with the guy. Gale was at a loss how to explain it to his master, since he grew up in a rough environment without parental love. Luciel found human emotions seriously messed up, but the Duke knew what it was like to be interested in someone who couldn't care less. Checking the time, the man told Gale it was time to head out for his interview with Lady Peregrine. Before leaving, the man told him to give it his best shot, because if he screwed up, he might as well not come back. Daphne had heard from His Highness that the man had worked at a branch of the Magic Tower for a while, and he used to authorize who could come and go, so she asked him to tell her more. Gale showed her the face he'd make when customers suddenly got jumpy and started acting like jerks. He looked at the lady, whose face showed a bunch of different emotions. The man mentally apologized to his boss because it looked like this was a total train wreck. Gale was sure no one in their right mind would hire a guy like that. But surprisingly, Lady Peregrine smiled and said that this was exactly the kind of guy she was looking for. Couldn't be better, actually. Daphne told him not to sweat it. She was just gonna ask a few simple questions, and then they'd be done. Easy for her to say, because Gale couldn't help but feel nervous around Lady Peregrine. By the way, she added that if they were going to work together, they needed to get something straight. Whatever the guy gets up to in his free time, Daphne wouldn't hold it against him. Could be like reading his favorite books or playing with, stuff. Gale was stoked, but quickly snapped back to reality, figuring it was some kind of test. He put on his serious face and told the lady he had no idea what she was talking about. Gale seriously didn't get why she kept smiling like she already knew everything. Daphne asked him to be honest with her because she already knew what kind of guy Gale was. The guy seemed like a bear on the outside, but he's a sweet bunny on the inside, and that's exactly what the main character liked. Daphne just wanted the people working for her to feel comfortable and enjoy themselves. For Gale, this was the best job in the world, so he immediately agreed to start his duties. Before leaving, Daphne asked the guy to keep it a secret that she was the owner of the salon. Gale asked how long it would be before the lady contacted him, and she said in about 2 or 3 months. She just needed to head out to the countryside for a bit right now. As soon as the brunette got back, Luciel immediately asked how the interview with Lady Peregrine went. Gale said it was a total success, and that the lady was a really good person. The Duke decided to get all the details from the girl herself. But out of nowhere, Gale drops the bomb that the lady's gonna be gone for like a month or 2. Translation: she's taking off somewhere, and who knows when she'll be back. So basically, Luciel can't see the lady for all that time, and he's freaking out because he's got no clue what to do with himself. His mind was racing, and he clenched his jaw tight. Then he grabbed his cloak like lightning and grilled Gale about where she went. No matter how many places the main character checked, every single bakery was mysteriously closed today. Suddenly, she noticed a dude behind her who was clearly in a major hurry. Daphne was super surprised when she realized he was headed straight for her. She froze when that familiar voice said he was still looking for her, 'cause he was afraid she'd already left. Luciel ripped off his cloak and finally